The creator of Jenkins.
Quickly about myself. So I'm Kohsuke. I'm the creator of the Jenkins project. I've been working on this for more or less about 7 years now, I think. And right now I'm working with Cloudbees. We do many things, but in my context, we do this commercial version of Jenkins called Jenkins Enterprise by Cloudbees. And we also have a hosted version of Jenkins where you could just let us manage your servers and slaves. It's called Debug Cloud. Before that, I used to work for Sun Microsystems and was doing XML and Java EE stuff, but that was, they went down the tube, so I started working on new things. So today, I'll be talking about the Jenkins, and since this is a Selenium meetup and not the Jenkins meetup, I thought I'd add a slide to introduce the Jenkins. It's what's typically called as continuous integration server. So people use that for doing the builds and test executions, including the Selenium executions that we'll be talking about today. And it's an open source software. Like I said, it's been 8 years or so old. And there are two things that really makes Jenkins stand out from the rest of the pack. The one is that it's very easy to get started, and once you get going, you can configure everything from the UI. The other thing is that it's highly extensible, meaning you could install any one of those 450 plugins that people from all around the world has developed and shared with the community, which integrates Jenkins with just about any tools you can imagine. So even though this is implemented in Java, people use this for .NET projects, PHP, Ruby, Python, etc., etc. So thanks to all these things, and it's kind of hard to beat the free software. So we enjoy quite a widespread adoption around the world. We track around 31,000 installations, and each installation is a server. And so we sort of estimate around maybe 500,000 users in every corner of the world. So today, I'll be talking about the Jenkins in conjunction with Selenium. And the reason I think these two combinations make sense is multifold. So the one is that the Selenium test tends to be slow running. So the last thing you want to do is to run them on your laptop or your workstations. And because while the Selenium tests are running, they pop up browsers from left to right, it practically makes your computer unusable. Right? So you want to run these things on the server where you're not impeded by the running test, and then you can keep on hacking code. Another aspect, I think, is that often, especially to keep certain versions of browsers in system, you need a controlled environment. So you can't, you have to disable auto-update, you have to have a specific versions of the browser installed in certain known paths in some cases, and so on. So it's a lot more easy. It's a lot easier and more stable to have the servers manage those nodes that's dedicated for running Selenium, as opposed to sort of relying on the individual developer's environment to execute those things. And then finally, the tests at this phase tends to be more parallelizable. Embarrassingly parallelizable, meaning there really isn't anything that you have to run sequentially. This is particularly true if you're thinking about running the same test with multiple different browsers, which, if I understand correctly, is the main value prop of the Selenium, right? So the model that we are getting to with Jenkins is that you could run, lots of tests in the number of servers and with different browsers running on the different machines, and then you aggregate the testing in the end. So the companion feature in Jenkins that makes this use case really shine is called the distributed builds. So the way it works is in Jenkins. So the Jenkins is a web app. I'll show you later. But so primarily, you'll be interacting with the master node who speaks HTTP. So you use a browser to talk to this node, doing configurations, looking at the build results, things like that. But if you could only use one computer, that only performs so well. So in Jenkins, what you can do is add slaves around the masters, and then master would start distributing the workload into those slaves. And because This is implemented in Java. It runs on just about every platforms that you need to care about. And today we have some people running up to 300 or so slaves connected to a single master. So, if you think about the test and build that demands 300 computers, that's a pretty heavy workload. So the scalability of this is reasonably good. Perhaps not at the scale of Hadoop, but still at plenty scalability for typical build and test purposes. So I wanted to quickly show the Jenkins UI to set up this distributed build to show you how easy it is. And to make a demo a bit more convincing, I got the second computer here, which I'll be using as a slave. And because I had to connect those things up, I got the major network operation center going on with all these cables flying around. But so if I remember correctly, so I need to remember the IP. So what I'm going to do is, if I come to this build executor status, and then I can add a new node. I've already added it, which looks like here. So all I have to do here is that I specify that this is the name of the computer. Because I don't have a name resolution here, I have to specify the IP. And I think it's correct. Let's see where it is, 1225. Yeah, so that's it. And then this is the directory where the Jenkins should use on this machine to store files, because for doing the build and test, you need to have some local files around. Okay? So that's all I need to configure, basically. And if I scroll down a little bit and then save, and then that should, let me disconnect the slave first, and then try to reconnect. And then that's, so what Jenkins is doing is now from here to this machine, it SSH into the machine, and it looks for if the necessary software is available, so it's checking the environment and all that stuff, and then eventually it starts copying some files to run this, and then now it's under the control of the Jenkins. So just by specifying the machine name, and then in this case, it's logging in through SSH, so I had the public key authentication already set up, so I didn't have to specify the password, but if you wanted to do that, you could have done it that way as well. So basically, just by specifying the connection parameters, you could log into all sorts of machines and then start using them for build slaves. So that's quickly about the distributed build support in Jenkins. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about so I mentioned earlier that the key part of Jenkins is this extensibility that integrates Jenkins with things. So there are a number of plugins that integrates Jenkins with Selenium-related tools, and then I wanted to talk about some of those. So the one is this Chrome driver plugin. This is a very small, nice and nifty plugin. As you probably already know, to use Chrome from WebDriver, you need to have a small native program called Chrome driver available on the target platform. So now, if you only have like 2 machines, manually installing Chrome driver is not a big deal. But if you have, let's say, 10 machines, right, you can imagine that you can start to see that just these little things like installing Chrome drivers around can start to get pretty tedious. Okay, so what this plugin does is it automates that. So if you could just come to the, there's an update center in Jenkins that allows you to install a new plugin. So let me see. So if you go to Manage Jenkins, and then there's a Manage Plugin page, and then from the list of the available plugins, you could just choose the one that you want to install. I've already installed this plugin in question, but you can just pick a few plugins that you want to install, and then you could install it and activate it, right, just like that. So that's how you could install that. This is how easy it is to install, let's say, a Chrome driver plugin. And once you do that, upon connecting slaves, this plugin would install the right Chrome driver based on detected platform and so on. So it's one less thing for you to worry about. And then these things would add up when you start to have a large cluster. But now the next plugin is, this is a real bigger and useful plugin that's called the Selenium plugin. It really should have been called as Selenium Grid plugin because that's what it does. It integrates with Selenium Grid. When I initially started this plugin, I expected this to be like a one-stop plugin for everything Selenium, but it turns out that the other people wanted to do other things other ways, so it couldn't work out that way. But anyway, so what this does is to enable Selenium Grid with Jenkins. And for the longest time, this has been with the Selenium 1, but finally we've upgraded that to work with Selenium 2. So the idea of this plugin is that, well, so I mentioned earlier that you have this distributed build support in Jenkins, right? So you can have a master in the middle, lots of slaves. So now you spend some effort setting up these, the build cluster. Once you install this plugin, it overlays the Selenium Grid on top of this Jenkins cluster. So it will automatically start the Selenium Grid node on all these slaves, and then automatically start the grid tab on the master node, and then they'll configure the grid tab and grid node in such a way that they start to talk to each other without you manually configuring anything at all. With things like this SSH slave launcher, the Jenkins master is the only daemon that you need to be managing. Everything else gets launched by the master automatically through the network. So it's a lot less overhead for the administrator to worry about. So this simplicity in the deployment, I think, is a key benefit of this. And because once this grid is running, it's a plain, vanilla, ordinary Selenium grid, so you can use this service from outside Jenkins. So if people interactively developing code in their laptop wanted to provision one of the slaves or one of the Selenium nodes from this grid, they could do so. And similarly, if you need to add some extra grid nodes to this grid, let's say you need some esoteric, let's say it's like IE6 running on this virtual PC because you can't maintain it anywhere else, you could do those things as well. So I think this makes it really easy to deploy Selenium. And another reason I like it is because this is kind of, this is a showcase for what I want to see more in the Jenkins. Because now that we automated a substantial part of the headache of the setting up a large number of machines and then put them under a single control, you could now start reusing this cluster for multiple purposes, things that's related to the build and test executions. So that's part of the reason why I keep spending more effort into this plugin. Now, the other thing about running Selenium with Jenkins is the difficulty involved around having GUI. So the browsers naturally want to see a GUI environment around it, but when you run it from Jenkins, they tend to run on the servers who don't really have any displays. So often you have to do some extra steps to make these things work nicely. So, for example, and then in the last Selenium meetup where I came, I spent most of the time talking about how to work around this stuff, but this time I'll go over them quickly. So if you wanted to see more details about the things you need in this space, you can go look up the past slides from SlideShare. So on Windows, right, you have to, in the older version of Windows, you could simply allow the services to interact with desktop, so that's just one checkbox to do. But the Microsoft, in their attempt to make their Windows secure, they essentially eliminated this capability. So nowadays, the simplest and easiest way to make this work is have the Windows auto login to some specific users, and then use the startup group to launch the slave agent. On Unix, you can very easily create a virtual display environment through XPNC or the X virtual frame buffer. There's a Jenkins plugin for XPNC so that you don't have to manually start and stop VNC servers. Jenkins will do those things for you. The Mac is a bit strange. They don't really have any support for virtual displays, so someone needs to be interactively logging into the console, the primary display. But once you do that, the slaves can connect through SSH and run the services. So there's different things needs to be done on different platforms. So I mentioned so back to the Selenium Grid plugin. Now, when we run Selenium Grid on top of Jenkins, we mostly run it untouched, aside from injecting configuration so that they know where the grid hub is and how to talk to each other. But we also added some extra capability in the system so that you could sort of take advantage of the fact that it's running on Jenkins. So you know, in using in using Selenium on Jenkins, one thing I noticed was that you know, I don't really have any control over which node in the grid the browser gets provisioned over. So I could specify the kind of browser, but for example, I cannot specify that this Firefox instance that I want needs to be running on Linux, or needs to be running on a particular site, let's say San Francisco site, as opposed to a Bangalore site or something like that. So we added the capability called the Jenkins.label. So this nicely takes advantage of the pluggability inside Selenium WebDriver as well. And then you could specify a label expression. So that's a Boolean expression that specifies the requirement of the node where you run the browser. And then once you do that, you know, the rest is just an ordinary WebDriver setup. And then while I've been doing this, I guess the one thing that I've been bugging me for a long time, and then since now I have the Selenium people in my audience, I thought I'd pitch this. But you know, every tutorial that I see online seems to talk about creating WebDriver programmatically like this, like you do the new Firefox driver, right? But this, I think, is anti-pattern, that because it hard codes the browser in tests, so it makes it very difficult for the test execution driver to swap in a different browser. So I'd rather much like to see the equivalent of the Selenium, the database connection string, where like you could specify the name of the driver, you know, the name of the server port and username and so on into a single string that can be plugged at the runtime, not at the development time. Right? So, you know, individual users could invent things like that, but then that makes it very difficult for tools like Jenkins to understand what's going on in the test, and it also makes it difficult for tools like Jenkins to help, you know, making things happen. So I don't know who is the Selenium committers in this audience, but you know, if you have their ears, you know, please let them know that they really should come up with some kind of connection URL like the database drivers have been doing for 10 years. Does that make sense? No? Yeah, okay. So another thing about running running Selenium tests inside Jenkins is that Selenium has this capability of capturing screenshots of the page, which is quite invaluable when you're debugging the tests, right? So now you could capture these screenshots and then save them in the files all right, but there's no way to associate that with particular tests. So Jenkins has this ability to look at the test reports from WebUI, but when you're doing that, you know, it doesn't really know what screenshots are related to this test case. So unfortunately, so this is a simple thing. It's like just a few missing links in here and there, but unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that spans across many different frameworks and tools, and so no single person could easily fix it. So you know, today there exists no convention to associate such files to test reports, and then the test reports are often generated by the test frameworks like JUnit or TestNG, and normal test code doesn't have any access to those things. So that makes it somewhat difficult. And then those test framework guys really don't have the word extensibility, so they don't know what to do with those things. So the simple solution that I came up with is to put this markup text inside the output of the test. So most of the test frameworks are capable of capturing the standard output from the test. So by emitting this file name in certain encoded form, the Jenkins could look at those things and notice that these are the files that needs to be associated with the test report. So they'd be able to read them and then parse them into the report. So for WebDriver, the code would look something like that. There's a nice abstraction called output type. And then there's the implementation of output type that does the persistence. So the default file implementation of output type does like non-persistent version of the file. So by the time Jenkins is looking into test reports, the screenshots are gone, which is useless. So we fixed that. I've been meaning to push this, send a pull request for that. But I got this code, the entire code hosted on GitHub. And then so you could, once you got the driver, you could take a screenshot and then you could put them into a little brackets, and then that's all it takes to make this work. And then on the Jenkins side, you'd install the JUnit attachment plugin. This is the one that looks at the test reports and then understand the conventions. And then so once this plugin is installed, when you're telling Jenkins that there are test reports that it needs to look at, you could also specify the test attachments be published, and then it will look at the reports and then does the right thing. So let me show you how the whole thing would work together. See, so now I go back to this. So I created a little job. So this, sorry, well, I think I'll keep the font bigger. Even, well, actually, this is too big. So in this project, what I did, I have a small Git project in my local computer. So I'm telling Jenkins to check that out. And once I check this out, I got this Maven. So this is a Maven project. So I'm specifying it to be run on Maven. And oops, did you see the screen scroll over there? And then once the build is over, I'm telling Jenkins that there are JUnit test reports that it should be looking at. And then there it is, this published test attachments. So to make this demo distributed, I got a little parameter here that says Selenium level, and then I'm specifying the node where the Selenium, the browser should be provisioned. So if you look at the code, so that's this is the test code. And so here I'm doing this, taking what I specified as a label and then setting it into the capability like I showed you earlier in the slides. And then talking to the GitHub and then running the test. So the net result is that once I start the build, it should start the Firefox on this machine. So you should see the Yahoo pop up. So let's see what's going on. I guess here it comes. So it's running a test there, going through the grid hub here, which is driving the grid node on this machine, which is running Firefox. Okay, so that's how you could sort of. So the Jenkins has a number of gimmicks allowing you to have a lot of different machines. So you can have Windows, you can have Mac, you can have Linux, and you can mix them up into a single cluster. So say you need to run the same test against Safari on Mac, the Firefox on somewhere, and then the IE on Windows. You could do those things very easily without hustling around, running around and connecting computers. So now that the tests have run, I can see the test reports. So for this, I only have one test. But if you look at the test reports, so we can see what it has produced. And here, as you can see, it has produced the attachment. So I can see it here, which is there you go. So this is the, I guess, the screenshot of Yahoo homepage that's taken on this node. So that's how the whole thing can be put together. And so back to slides. So I guess so while this works, the thing that I want to see more of going forward is that if there's more intelligence built into Selenium underneath for the WebDriver. For example, I noticed that it's capable of automatically taking a screenshot whenever an exception is thrown. So if it doesn't rely on you to do this gluing, and instead if it does that kind of printing automatically when it knows that it's running in this Jenkins environment, then we can do the whole experience a lot better for you guys without you doing anything, just by having those two projects talk to a little bit more. So one of my hope in my coming here to talk to the Selenium audience is like to get the hang of the Selenium developers and then get some of these features into the underlying Selenium code so that you don't have to spend time doing this plumbing work. But on the positive note, right? So the whole thing works. You can have nice, the distributed cluster of nodes running Selenium, capturing screenshots and all that. And the setting up Selenium has never been easier, especially for grid, because practically it is really click and deploy. You can install plugins from the update center from the UI. You could install slaves just from the main UI, and so on and so forth. So you really don't have to touch this computer at all to get going with this kind of setup. And so we recently got another developer inside the Jenkins community who is working on this Selenium grid plugin. So he's looking for more ideas for the improvements in this space. One of the obvious things is like, well, it'd be super sexy if you could not only capture the screenshots, but also do the video recording. So guys, that's generally what I wanted to show. So I don't know if I have any more time, but if like I should be able to take 1 or 2 questions if you have. But did this make sense, or like did it went over your head, or like? I'm a bit worried. Yeah. So the question was, well, if you're using Jenkins, is there any reason not to use Selenium?
Is there any reason for me to use Jenkins and not use Hudson? Hudson is also.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, there's a slide that I have on the online. I don't know if I can show it. Maybe I can. If this internet connection works, to make this network work together, I got some messed up setup going, so maybe it doesn't cooperate. But what I was trying to show you was, so we had this Jenkins user conference last year in San Francisco, and I had this slide, for that talk, I looked at the statistics after the split between Jenkins and Hudson. And then if you look at the numbers, it's pretty clear that all the actions are with Jenkins. And then the Hudson guys, I don't know if they are still around. But so, yeah. So most of the people have been upgrading. So sorry, I couldn't make this work, but yeah. So so I mentioned earlier about the Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees. One of the features that I'm working on, in fact, I was working on this before I came here today, was to do this failover between masters. So it's coming to I guess, the commercial version of it. And I didn't ask him to ask this question, by the way. So, and yeah. So, the question was, do I have any roadmap for improving the UI of Jenkins? Yes. So the version that I'm using here is actually some of the newly improved versions. So you see like the status, the breadcrumb sticks on the top, and then you see the context menu for things. So it will help you with navigations. So like if you wanted to go to a particular build, you could do so. And then let's say you're looking at the console output, and then decided that you need to change the configurations, you could do so. So toward the end of the this February, a bunch of us went to the Potsdam, which is an event in Belgium, and then we got together and sit down and came up with a list of the improvements in the UI that we'd like to make. So these are some of the things that came out of it. So if you have more ideas about the things that we can do better, I'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, these improvements are just coming in the last few releases. And there's more improvements to be made, obviously. So yeah, so upgrade to newer version in a few months, and then you should enjoy all the new improvements. So the question was, what's the criteria for getting the code accepted? If you have the code written, that's obviously get accepted. If you write a plugin, that automatically gets accepted as well. For the UI thing, the main challenge is like everyone thinks they are UI experts when they are not. So like I don't really know whose opinion that I should trust. But at least I know that I'm not the UI expert. But you need to prove me that you know what you're talking about. But so that's the only challenge there. Yeah, but yeah, so looking forward to talk to you, I guess. Right. So let's see. I don't know how to summarize this question in a quick way, but. So often, once you start building a real test, you have to have very complex choreography between different pieces. Like you have to compile a test, and then you have to deploy the subject for the test here, you have to have the test running over there. You wanted to see the log files that's produced on the server, aggregate the whole thing, like wait for everything to complete and shut things down and blah, blah, blah. So, once you start to that point, it gets, you need to be spending a bit more time with Jenkins so that you tell it to do the choreography. There are a number of plugins, and then some actively being worked on, some more proven that let you do that kind of inter-machine setups. That's a worthy of a talk on its own, so I can't really answer it tonight. But let's see. So what's the short answer I can make? There are a couple of so we should talk offline afterward, and I can give you some pointers about some of the plugins that you might want to look into. So I think my time is already running out, so I guess that's it for me. So hopefully you'll be able to use Jenkins. I guess I forgot to show you the website address, the jenkinsci.org. So if you haven't been using it already, please. And thank you very much.